LRT Subcommittee meeting of May 23rd, 2024. Reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. As we have quorum present today, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have with us Councillor Huang, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Crutch, Councillor Kassar, citizen member of the subcommittee, Carl Andrus, and Michelle Diplock, and Anthony Salimi. Thank you all for being with us. We have our front bench here to support the LRT agenda items, as well as our clerks. So ready to kick things off? Quorum is present. On we go. First motion is approval of the agenda. Could I please have a mover and seconder?
Chair Nan, I have a changes to the agenda first.
Oh, well then. Do you want to tell me about those changes?
Sure. The following changes were made to the agenda. Item number 6, delegation request. James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process. He's going to be presenting virtually for today's meeting. And item number 8, staff presentations. 8.1, applying a climate justice lens to the light rail transit report PED 24087 citywide.
Thank you for that. So it's moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, it's before committee for vote.
No, it's coming.
That carries on to declarations of interest I need to declare at this time, either disqualifying or non-disqualifying. Seeing none, we'll move on to minutes of our previous meeting. May I please have a mover and seconder? Mover, Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Electronic vote if there's no discussion. And to fellow subcommittee members, you can join us around the horseshoe. I'd prefer if it's one or the other versus both. So come on onto the horseshoe. And that carries on to communication items. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive communication 5.1, which is correspondence from Rose Jansen, respecting our transit system should remain public. Mover, thank you, Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on the communication item? Seeing none, it's before subcommittee to vote. And that carries. Almost. It carries. There we go. Delegation. 6.1 is James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process. To virtual delegation, may I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request for today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Kassar. I need committee members to vote. And that carries. So first up is James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process of the LRT. James, you're joining us virtually. I see your square. If you can turn on, there we go, we can see you and we can hear you. So you know the rules of delegation well, Mr. Kemp. You've got 5 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a little ding, which is a reminder that you have a minute remaining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Good morning, Madam Chairperson and members of the LRT Subcommittee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me today. My name is James Kemp, and I'm here today to speak regarding an accessibility plan for the LRT project. Well, we're on the verge of the largest transformation of this city in its history, a decade-long project sweeping through the heart of Lower City, Hamilton. While its ultimate goal will be to better connect the city, it must first cleave it in two, and herein lies the rub. Regardless of whether you think this project is good for the city or not, or whether it should be operated publicly or privately, the time for such discussions is over. We're in the roller coaster. The bar is down. We're heading up the hill. We can hear the chain going clickety-clack beneath us. We now have to figure out what to do when we reach the top and this roller coaster really gets rocking. On a side note, you got to love that I worked in a train metaphor here. Construction projects are very disruptive. They tend to disrupt the lives of all those in proximity. Accessibility around construction sites is never a serious consideration. The people in charge see it as a temporary problem, and everyone affected can just figure out how to deal with it until the project is complete. If accessibility and safe passage of those with disabilities is ever considered, it is an afterthought and with only the most minor of accommodations. This project, however, is going to take years and will spread across the entire lower city. Accessibility through the construction areas must be maintained for the safety and well-being of all. A good friend and mentor had an experience I would like to share with you. I can't ask him to share it himself as he passed away last March. His name was Tom Manzik. Tom was visually impaired. He carried a white cane, but he didn't use it until he really needed it. One day he was traveling through downtown and somehow ended up wandering through a construction site. He quickly realized he was somewhere he shouldn't be, but was completely disoriented and couldn't find his way out. He wasn't even aware yet that he was on a construction site and was in serious danger. Finally, he was spotted by some workmen and led out to safety, but they remarked how he was lucky he didn't fall into the pit. The thought of how close he came stuck with him, and I could still hear the fear in the voice a few times he related the story to me. I relay this story to highlight that people with disabilities often have different interactions or experiences with the world around us, and others have difficulty empathizing as we don't have a common frame of reference. My last name is Kemp. My family has a long history of construction in this city. I myself have experience with industrial, commercial, and residential construction, both as a sub and a general contractor, from concrete footings to high structural steel, as a laborer and as a foreman. I tell you all this so you understand that I know what I speak when I say that little thought is often given to the environment impacted by construction. As I mentioned, it's supposed to be a temporary situation, and everyone is expected to find a way to cope until it's completed. However, the LRT project is so big and will take so long that we need to have an actual accessibility plan in place. I know that staff will say there are rules for making a site accessible, but they are insufficient in our experience, and guidelines would improve the matter. There also needs to be a direct line of communication to the project to relay concerns and find solutions to address them. I understand that once the groundwork is laid, Metrolinx will come in and we will lose all control of the site as they operate more like a black box, but it is my hope that if we show them the way and they see the benefits, they may choose to follow. I know that sounds optimistic and maybe a little naive, but I know of no other way to do this job. Now let's get down to brass tacks and discuss what we're talking about. For every path diverted, an alternate path within 100 meters should be provided. It should be a relatively smooth and firm path that connects us back up to sidewalk level. As people using canes, crutches, walkers, and rollators struggle with every step, we must keep the detour to a manageable distance, as it is unfair to those that cannot bypass the work altogether. If it has to go beyond that distance, I would go so far as to suggest a seating area be attached to provide a rest point. While small bumps, rough terrain, and obstructions are easy for some to manage, it is difficult and painful for others. Fencing should not encroach upon the sidewalks unless absolutely necessary, and loose rubble in the path of travel should be attended to promptly. Attention must be paid to proper wayfinding for the blind and visually impaired. There needs to be high color contrast markings clearly delineating the path of travel, and as we are redirecting urban braille, perhaps those white cane bars we had inside on the sidewalk bypasses are some version of them. Furthermore, attention needs to be paid to those with hearing loss. There needs to be warning indicators, not only in sound, but also in flashing lights to attract attention and alert people to danger. Regarding signage, any complex information should also contain pictograms to improve comprehension, and all signs should be mounted up on poles and not placed on sidewalks, creating obstruction. I have a number of other suggestions, but I only have 5 minutes of this meeting. I know of a committee that contains several working groups that would love to work with staff to make this transformational project go more smoothly and improve accessibility, not just for people with disabilities or seniors, but for all citizens of the City of Hamilton. A rising tide raises all boats. In conclusion, this project will affect the lives of those living in the lower city dramatically. Accessibility is usually added as an afterthought during the planning of these projects, and I'm here today during the early stages of the LRT to ask that you make more effort to address it before a shovel breaks ground. Other LRT projects are plagued with accessibility issues, so let's do what we can to make ours different. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your delegation. Speakers list is open, and first up is Councillor Crutch.
Thanks very much for your delegation. I'll briefly say, before I ask a question, I attended some of the early LRT discussions that were held as public meetings on the subject, and this came up a number of times. And the discussions were about what other municipalities have done when they were going through LRT construction, what was successful and what wasn't. I'm just curious to know if you've had a chance at any point to weigh in on those things or look at those kinds of things, see what other cities have done when it comes to LRT construction, where things were successful and not. And then when we go to receive this, I have a question for staff.
In answer to your question through the chair, I don't have experience with the plans in place. My experience is more with the complaints process. So I usually do the research from the other end, just oftentimes because different municipalities are a little difficult to manage. They're almost alien compared to ours. But I do know it from the complaint point of view.
Okay, thanks. And you've been pretty vocal on this subject for a while now, so I think I know where you stand, but appreciate your delegation. Thanks for coming forward.
Thank you. Next up, we have Member Andrus.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for your delegation. It echoes a lot of what we're hearing at the engagement events that we do at the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, and we outline construction concerns in one of our reports to the city around that. So I hope to hear more from staff around that. My question to you through the chair is, what do you believe that this committee can do to help get ahead of, so that we are not being reactive in dealing with the construction complaints that will come and dealing with issues that occur as they're occurring? Is there a proactive solution that either you've found in your research from other municipalities or recommendations that you have for this committee that can get us ahead of that construction concern and those construction mobility concerns? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I find that I apologize. I just had a bit of a brain. Could I have a quick recap on the question? I'm sorry.
No problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I'm happy to repeat. So just very quickly, if you have any suggestions for this committee that we can be proactive as opposed to reactive in dealing with the construction concerns that you've outlined, and the ones that we're hearing from residents around, of course, 14 kilometers from property line to property line of our city being torn up for anywhere from 3 to 6 years.
I apologize for that. Thank you very much. The idea of being proactive is trying to foresee what is technically the unforeseeable, but because we're using lived experience, we're getting a much better view of what the experiences are from others. My best recommendation is that we try our best to foresee all possibilities. That way, when we do come across those we haven't met yet, we're not already dealing with other issues. With those issues already taken care of ahead of time.
Thank you very much, and I have a question for staff later as well.
Thank you. No further questions for our delegate. Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Kemp, for your delegation, and we now need to receive the delegation. So if I could get a mover and seconder, mover and Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Electronic vote to receive, and then we'll open up to questions related to staff. Your computer's frozen. Would you like a manual vote? No? Okay. We'll just bear with the tech. That carries. Thank you. Okay, questions?
This has been something I've been concerned about for, I guess, nearly a decade. And when we had speakers come and talk about these at public meetings, they didn't have excellent answers to the questions that were asked by crowds about what exactly the plan was going to be. I've seen this play out in other municipalities in Ontario. I've even seen it play out when it comes to large reconstructions of downtown, like for instance in London, Ontario, who recently reconstructed a big portion of its downtown. When I went there 2 different times, once during the construction, then once after the construction, I saw the implementation, and it was, at best, terrifying. So what is our plan? What can we do to ensure that there will be a plan and a public forum for feedback on the subject, so it's really clear exactly how we intend to deal with accessibility concerns during LRT construction? Because at this point, I don't have that access to some of that stuff, and it may already exist, but my question is, what's the plan, and is there a plan to bring that forward and get feedback and so forth?
Over to you, Director.
Morning to Chair. My name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office. Thank you, Council, for the question. From my previous experience working on similar kind of project, normally they do develop some kind of a working group during construction where they bring the industry experts and the stakeholder. If there are any construction-related issues like accessibility and other, they normally discuss in those forums and then try to mitigate and address. So they do bring that working group during construction where they bring these issues and then try to address those during. And in terms of accessibility, I can mention that, Metrolinx have standards. Typically, AODA is the minimum standard, but they do have some higher standards which they have been applying to Eglinton Crosstown and Hazel McKinnon line. And in my opinion, they will be continuing to use the lessons learned from those projects and will apply to this Hamilton LRT project.
Councillor?
Thanks. So I understand what you said is that it's a reactive plan that takes place during construction, not something that's necessarily proactive and developed in advance of construction. I just want to say in Ward 2 specifically, there will 100% be impacts for residents to accessibly access services in the core during construction. Metrolinx has 100% told me that already. I've walked through block by block with them. It's an extremely narrow corridor in Ward 2, and the most of the pedestrian realm will be significantly impacted at some point. And so I'm happy to bring forward a motion and work with you offline to come up with something so we can get a recommendation to Metrolinx to make sure there's a plan in place in advance where we specifically know we will be doing something, because AODA standards are not good enough. They're not actually designed for things like this, actually. We don't have standards in the province that are meant for this kind of large-scale development at the pedestrian level. So I don't need to get into the big debate about it now or questions now. I can simply just work with you offline to come up with something in advance of the next LRT subcommittee meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. And Member Andrus, you indicated you had a question as well.
Yeah, so along a similar vein around the proactive versus reactive, and I'm just wondering, when the councillor was through the chair speaking of those kind of proactive steps, I just wanted to say the centering of, as our delegate pointed out, the people with lived experience of disability is really important. And on other Metrolinx sites that I've toured, it tends to be that reactive, and it tends to be unfortunately very difficult where you have to reach out to the Metrolinx customer service representative who then reaches out through their project chain, through the contractor to the subcontractor. So having a process that centers people with lived experiences to be able to not only pre-design some of those accessibility challenges, I think would be essential, as well as making sure that the process is ironclad and people are very aware of how they can get those mobility challenges addressed. So I'd just like to ask through the chair, what considerations have you heard from Metrolinx besides the construction table that you're talking about around centering the voices of people with lived experiences with mobility challenges, especially during this project? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. It will be a continuous dialogue with Metrolinx, and I can just mention there is already a lot of discussions happening with Metrolinx and our stakeholder accessibility as well. For example, last year, accessibility committee members, they toured the Waterloo Ion project and then provided some lessons learned for Metrolinx, which we conveyed to Metrolinx, right? So what we heard. And similarly, I think there is a meeting scheduled where our staff will be presenting to accessibility committee probably in April or May, where we will hear their concerns, and these are the information we will bring to Metrolinx, right? So obviously, Metrolinx has a number of lessons learned from other projects as well, but we will continuously advocate our accessibility requirement to Metrolinx during the construction. And I want to mention about the process, because there will be a permitting process involved, and where city staff will be looking at our traffic control plan during construction, and our staff will ensure that whatever the concerns we raise from the accessibility committee, or whatever the city standard requirements are, they are being applied by Metrolinx contractor when they are developing the construction management plan, right? So eventually they will require our permit, and we will ensure that these interests are protected when they are starting the construction.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to be clear that we did have some flexibility during the permitting process for influencing this. Thank you so much for your answer.